Hello everyone and welcome to the round glass review for the Minolta Rokkor, or Rocker. I've heard it both ways. I generally go with Rokkor-PF 58mm f1.4. Minolta introduced this lens in 1966. Now let's analyze that name. Rokkor is the line of lenses. PF indicates the number of groups and elements respectively. P stands for penta, or 5 groups. F simply means 6, and it's the 6th letter of the alphabet. The second letter in that code is just simply a count. So the PF means that this lens has 5 groups and 6 elements. Typical lens uses for this are as a standard lens with good portrait chops on 35mm and full frame, and as a portrait lens basically exclusively on smaller formats. For your bottom line up front, as a portrait lens, this is one of the great lenses for crop format users. For GFX users, this is a great way to get an ultra-fast lens with a slightly wide field of view for an affordable price. Your focal length and angle of view are 58mm and 41 degrees on full frame, 87mm and 27.5 degrees on aps-c, and 46mm and 51 degrees on GFX. Your aperture range is 1.4 through 16. Element and group count are 5 and 6. Design type is double gauze. Filter size is 55mm. Your closest focus is 0.6 meters, which, in the US, is 2-foot-long hot dogs laid tip to tip. Your drive type is manual focus, native mount Minolta SR. Dimensions are 65mm by 49, and as a note, I did find a number of sources online that said 41mm. That is not correct. It is actually 49mm long. And the weight is 275 grams. This lens works well on mirrorless with a macro adapter, as it allows this lens to focus very close for the focal length. For full-frame shooters, this is a fine lens if you are invested in the SR mount already, either for film or with an adapter for your mirrorless camera. As a destination lens, one that you would go out of your way for, this can deliver nice results for some users, but it's not one that I would say every user would benefit from trying at least once. For aps-c and micro four thirds users, this is a fantastic portrait option. For GFX shooters, this is a nice, slightly wide lens that has a lot of character, and it can be an affordable entry into the ultra-fast, wide standard lens space. And lastly, for film shooters, this is an affordable, fast standard option that brings lots of great image character. We're going to jump in with the DOTS test chart, and wow, take a look at what this lens lacks. If you said aspherical elements, well done. That is some serious spherical aberration. The spherical aberration, however, does not mean that this lens is soft. In fact, going here to the center 100% crop, we can see that the monitor pixels are rendered and that the dot test squares retain their general square shape, even if the corners are a bit soft on those squares. Resolution here is quite good. Now right away, going out from the center, we also see some strong chroma as well, and it takes the form of the spherical aberration glow, looking as though it's being pushed away from the image center. Going around the corners, we see chroma and spherical aberration blurs being affected by projection angle to create the mustache-shaped corner blurs that will, in some settings, help ensure swirly corner blur from this lens. Breathing we're going to take a look at from both the closest focus point and a hair further out. In both cases, with the lens focused across a 0.7 meter throw, at the closest focus point, breathing is jarring, and this is likely due to the general discomfort of having the subject fill that much of the frame. At a more useful focus distance, breathing is present, but on par with stills lenses of this one's vintage. The aperture is stepped and half stops except from 1.4 to 2, and it has strong detents. The front element is non-rotating but does move in and out 7mm, which is 12% of this lens's focal length. The focus throw is 180 degrees with a stationary, wide, and milled focus ring. Focus damping will absolutely depend on the lens, and I've had copies of this that had focusing looser than in 2 sizes too large crocks, and others with focus rings as rigid as a semi-truck's locking lug nut. Sharpness is good, but it's overshadowed by significant spherical aberration and chroma. Build quality is In keeping with vintage professional lenses, excellent. Contrast is good stop down, but largely washed out wide open due to a generalized flare that gets worse as the lens points toward light. Aperture stars at f2 show that some of this lens's cat eye blur relates to mechanical vignette as well as projection angle because the aperture shape only appears on part of the blurry areas and unevenly so on the green lights on the left of this image. By f2.8, that clears up, and some fan shapes begin to appear from in-focus lights. Stars start to look star-like at f8 and peak at f11, where they're generally good and well-defined across each color channel. At f16, the red channel stars suffer some diffraction softness. Out-of-focus areas, wide open, are super smooth and absolutely like factory new velvet on the eyes. Stop down and they treat the eyes rather like a stepped-on rake. Distortion is apparent and in the barrel direction when photographing graph paper. In use, distortion is a non-issue, especially for this lens's intended uses of general photography and portraits. Light loss is surprisingly tame on full frame with corner darkness visible at f1.4 and f2 only. On GFX, the story changes and light loss is apparent through f4 in some amount, with the wide open light loss being particularly significant. Flare and ghosting are both present, with flare being a far larger issue that saps images of their contrast and sharpness, worsening as this lens is pointed toward light. Ghosting can occur, but is more well controlled. In a related flaw, this lens delivers hotspots in images as it stops down. A hotspot is an area of an image where excess light arrives unfocused, and this is going to be generally in the center of the image, and it creates a diffuse bright spot. On paper, the Minolta Rokkor-PF 58mm f1.4 is a lens that should resonate with me. The mix of optical flaws has the ability to create captivating images, and as a statement about this lens for portraits, it does that and does it well. That said, I never once found myself reaching for it, never wanted to use it, and always kind of felt like taking photos with this lens was a chore. This is a lens that portrait photographers will likely find more captivating than anyone else. As a lens for that use, it stands out well and will perform in a manner that flatters subjects. But as a general use lens and for other subjects, which largely explains why I am not particularly drawn to this as my portrait work is typically done for private clients and not shared on social media, this lens, it's just not a good all-arounder. Hey, and if you enjoyed this video, check out this other one you'll probably really like too.